I'm Duggan Cooley, the CEO of Pinellas Community Foundation, and I'm joined with
Meg Loki, Director of Philanthropy. And today we have a very special guest, Kit Van Pelt. Kit is an estate planning attorney with Older Lundy Koch Martino. She's also a board member of Pinellas Community Foundation, past president of the Pinellas Estate Planning Council, past president of the Clearwater Bar Foundation. And this last year, she won an award that was the Florida Supreme Court Sixth Circuit Pro Bono Award for all of the pro bono work she's done. We are so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I wear a lot of hats.
We're talking about estate planning and charitable giving. Mm-hmm. So explain what legacy giving or charitable estate planning means and how people do that.
It can mean a variety of things, and it can be something as simple as, your day-to-day giving to your local charities. You can give to a charity on beneficiary forms. You can include the charities of your choice in an estate plan, or, they can take it a step further and they can come to an organization like Pinellas Community Foundation and really, delve deep into what they're passionate about and kind of make sure that whatever part of their estate goes to what they care about the most. And it's done prior to them passing away, so they know it's done to their liking.
It has to feel good.
It does. And I think people get a real sense of purpose when they're passionate about something in their community, and then they can implement a plan so they know that when they pass away, a little bit of them is in that organization, or they made a contribution to something that they cared about so much in their lifetime.
So as you're helping people put plans together, what do you see as the most common ways people include charitable giving in their estate plans?
The most common way is in their will or trust is, I leave $1,000 to X charity, and they can take it a step further if they want to put an IRA beneficiary form. They can, give to charity that way. Charities usually love an IRA because they don't have to pay the taxes on it, and they get a little bit more out of it than, a family member who would have to pay the taxes on it. So that's the easiest way to do it, but it can get as complex as the person wants to get with charitable remainder trusts, or we can do, gifting in their lifetime and do some good tax planning that not only helps their family not pay taxes when they die, but, also completes their charitable goals. So it can be as easy or as complex as a person wants it to be.
And you guide them through that.
Yeah. And it's fun. I really enjoy doing that. We have an estate planning questionnaire that we have people fill out, before the consultation. And one of the main questions is, are you charitably inclined? And if so, we have a little spot for them to list their charities, and they leave it blank. I always circle back because everyone's always charitably inclined. They just they always think they have to plan for their kids first, or, take care of the family part first. And then they kind of like, oh yeah, I do want to benefit, either their church or just something local. And, so it's a nice talking point to get them to stop and remind them to, make sure they include those things in their documents.
And there's some tax benefits as well, right?
Yeah, there are, depending on what kind of assets they have. You can play around with that and, benefit the charity more, help the family not pay taxes. Or if they, they're lucky enough to have a lot of money, you can do a lot of planning and benefit a charity and, save their family on an estate tax when they die. So it's fun. It's I look at it like a puzzle, you kind of put the pieces where they need to go, and, it's fun to kind of get that information from the clients.
And have you seen examples of a transformative gift that somebody left in their will that or estate that really impacted a charity or anything?
I haven't really seen a charity be impacted on a greater level. There was a local estate that, donated a lot of land to Pinellas County that I think did really well in the end. I think everyone really benefited from that. But I have to say, one of the best parts of the job is when you call these charities, let them know that they're going to be receiving some money. They're so grateful. I have never met a charity or, an organization that was not just grateful and, so appreciative of that person that they were remembered in their documents. And it's just, overall, I'm impacted by just hearing how they tell me how much it's going to help them. And so it's important to keep reminding clients to do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes those dollars that come from people's estate plans, especially when charities don't know about them or haven't been told in advance, The experience itself, it might not seem like some massive transformative gift that's going to help build a building, but often come at the right moments when organizations need some extra help. It allows them to continue doing some of the great work that they already do. I'm glad you get to hear the positive side in making those phone calls. It's obviously around, unfortunate time in someone's life or for a family, but being able to interact with charities and tell them the good news of what's happening is a positive spin on it.
Yeah. And I always like to tell them, I always like to ask the client to make sure it's okay, but because sometimes I don't want to tell the charity too far in advance, but at the end, I'm allowed to kind of tell them how important the charity was, or if it was like cancer research and they had a family member that it was impacted and, their research, helped a family member. I always like to tell them the story of how they got in the documents. And so it's just, that part is really meaningful to me. And so it's important to keep trying to remember to add clients to do it.
And I always try to remind people that are leaving a planned gift to a charity to say something to the charity or let us say something to the charity because, they don't get the opportunity to be thanked after death. So, personally, they can publicly be thanked, but it's nice that they can get that personal touch and sincere thank you from the different nonprofits.
They don't even have to tell them how much.
No.
They can just tell them that we've remembered you in our estate plans. We really care about the work that you do, or you've had a meaningful impact on our life, and we want to make sure you're remembered. So they can do it in a way that fits what they want to accomplish.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of like not too much, what is the dollar amount that someone can leave a charity? I mean, there's a misconception that it has to be millions of dollars or some.
There is a big misconception about that because people always say, "Oh, I don't have enough, to do or to give." And, I tell them like any amount it matters to the charity. So it's whatever you can afford to give or you want to give, because the little donations add up to big donations. And so, I always try to remind people if something has really impacted your life and you want to leave a little legacy back to them as a thank you or as a contribution to what they gave you, it can be as small as $50, $100 and all the way up, so there is no too small, I think, of a dollar amount for a charity. So
you mentioned earlier children or family and people kind of wanting to consider family first. How do you help advise and help clients balance when they want to, yes, absolutely take care of their family or make sure something is there to support their children, but then also support a charitable legacy if that's what they want to do?
I try to kind of remind them, it's like a pie, and all their assets are, this pie. And, when you really sit down and you comb through the numbers or you comb through how much everyone's going to get, and you can say, okay, well, your kids are going to get, 40% each of this big number. And, would 20% to charity, what would that look like? And how would that, you're still going to be able to accomplish all these goals for your family and grandkids, but, we can still build in this little component. And the second thing really especially with IRAs now, because you used to, when you inherited an IRA, you could stretch it out over your life expectancy and your tax burden personally wouldn't be so bad. And now that you have to deplete it so quickly over time, sometimes like if I give my IRA to my child and it causes them a huge taxable event, that's not in their kids' best interest. But if we switch that asset over to maybe charitable giving and we give these kids these other assets, we can accomplish a lot of goals. So again, you can accomplish everything, but you just really got to kind of sit down and run the numbers and find out what exactly they want to do and how do you get there.
So in the planning world, you could have a financial advisor, you can have an estate planning attorney, you might be working with a community foundation. How do you describe sort of those different roles to people and what each of those people does in that whole mix?
I use the expression, it takes a village,
Yes.
But we all kind of work together as a team. And it really just depends on, at least for me personally, how did the client come to me? Did it come to me through their financial advisor, their CPA, foundation? Or is my client now, I'm going to be building a team. So I can either be the quarterback or I can be part of a team. And I really like the collaborative approach because I might not know everything the financial advisor knows, or the CPA knows what your tax background is, maybe more than I do. So I always like to say everyone has their function of, from a CPA tax background, the financial advisor tells you how much, maybe what percentages. And then my role is kind of, okay, let's memorialize it in the documents. so we can execute, this 3-part plan. So we all have a different role, but a very important role that I think, when somebody wants to give at least a sizable gift, all of us are really necessary to make sure it happens.
Right.
And what role would PCF play in setting up a charitable gift in an estate?
So what I really like to kind of brag about you guys about is I do have a lot of clients that are very charitably inclined, but they're so overwhelmed by how many charities are out there and how to navigate through, all of them, or, because maybe 20, 30 years ago, like people kind of knew national charity names. There was maybe
Mhm.
2 of the things that piqued their interest, and that was it. And now there's just so many. And now they can do locally. And I think people more and more want to benefit their backyard and the community they grow up in or they're residing in. So I always like to tell them, the minute I can spot these little attributes, I kind of point them in your direction, because you guys can then run with it and explain to them all the different ways they can accomplish their charitable giving. And if their charities change over time, they don't have to necessarily come to me and, spend the money changing their document. They can come to you guys and continue growing who they're going to benefit in the community. So it's more cost effective to bring you guys in early on for the client. And then, we just keep maintaining that relationship.
And then they can actually, in their documents, leave the gift to Pinellas Community Foundation, which is a 501c3.
Yes.
And then we can either establish endowments for the different charities that they have, or distribute immediately to these different charities. And then they can change their mind.
Yes, without having to pay me to change it. And they really like that selling point. And I think people too, again, they don't realize, charitable giving used to just be you fill out that form, you get in the mail and you send it in. I think it's changed so much, over the years. I think they get a really good education when they come here about all the different ways they can be charitably inclined. It's not just, a check and that's it. They can really go see the impact here locally.
We've seen it help attorneys too in sort of setting up their plans, because sometimes they do want to be charitable, but then that's where they get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And so, trying to make sure plans get drafted, things get taken care of, you're timely about getting all of that done. If they can work with PCF and some of the legacy planned legacy funds that we have, because they can change it over time, they can get started with something. And then if they want to talk to us again in 2 weeks because something else popped into their head, or 6 months later, but then they can still get the rest of their documents completed with their attorney, and not have this charitable, I'm interested in all these things, but I don't really know what to do, delay their entire planning process.
Yes, because that can be part of the problem, is that, they don't know what to pick from, or they don't know what direction to go in. So it's very easy to insert Pinellas Community Foundation into the documents, and then you guys can, take as much time as you need to educate them on what direction they want to go in.
And then sometimes they pick these charities, 10, 15 years, maybe 40 years before they pass away. And the charity may no longer be around. So one great thing about PCF is that if they leave the gift through us, we can find another charity that honors that donor's intention, that does that same work.
Yes, because if you just named, the XYZ charity in your trust and it doesn't exist anymore, your family or the trustee would have to go to court and have a court find a similar charity in that vein, and then the money could go in that direction. But that costs your estate a lot of money to do. And then we don't really know what the deceased person would have wanted. They might not would have wanted that to happen. So a lot of it can be, unexpected and maybe not what the person wanted if you put, that specific thing in your document and you don't maintain with your attorney, or, dust your documents off every few years and take a look. So that can happen.
So along those lines of sort of dusting your documents off and taking a look at them, how often should you revisit your plans with your attorney?
So we always say estate planning is a process, and typically every 3 to 5 years is a good amount of time to do that, just depending on your family circumstances or when your documents were last done. I know I have a lot of clients that did their first set when they had their children were young, and then we didn't see them for 30 years, but now their children are grown, they revisit it. So once we've kind of done that, after that, just kind of like maintenance. But It just depends on what their goals are and how often they want to change their minds. But I would say 3 years is, a good starting point to
Wow.
just
I need to get in there.
dust them off. So, well, and I also found too, sometimes, the laws change. So if, they're not keeping current on what's going on in the world or, tax matters. So it could be even more crucial to do it sooner.
That's the thing that you're great at.
Yeah. So
Staying up on all that.
yeah, that's what we're here for.
So for people who might feel hesitant about estate planning, or might be worried about doing that, what kind of encouragement would you give them to get started?
People are always usually very hesitant sometimes to have these conversations. They're not easy conversations to have. But I always tell them, first find an attorney you like working with. It's like all relationships, it has to be a good working relationship. And then once you found that person, when you sign your documents, every client is the same way. They feel such a huge sense of relief that it's organized, it's done, and what they wanted is going to happen and it's going to get implemented. And I always tell people that are hesitant, it'll cost your family so much more to figure out, assume, and then try to execute after you're gone. And it's a lot of time and money wasted. And, people are grieving. It's stressful enough as it is. They don't need a huge legal burden on top of, all of that. So I always tell people it's worth, going to see an attorney for an hour and rip that Band-Aid off. And really, once you get the ball rolling, it's fine. And then the minute they sign, everyone's the same. It's that huge sense of relief,
And people can tell their friends what they care about and their neighbors and their children. But if it's not written down and memorialized somewhere,
Yes.
No, I can't tell you how many cases there are where people said, oh, my kids will take care of it. And then, all the troubles ensues or, things pop up out of the woodwork or, it's never as simple as you think it's going to be. And it's never as cost effective as you think it's going to be. And so I just tell people, just do it, get it over with. And then, because we've all heard a nightmare probate story. We've all heard, how things go tragically wrong. So I like when people tell their neighbors, oh, I just had my estate plan done. It was a piece of cake, so it's just kind of spreading that, knowledge and information that it's not as bad as you think it is. So.
Well, the opposite of a nightmare story. Duggan, do you have any stories? Being here at PCF, we get a lot of estate gifts. Are there any transformative gifts that you can think of that really helped change lives?
Some of the favorite stories I have are of donors who wanted to remain anonymous. They've been able to do great things in the community through their estate plan, and being able to, similar to your stories about calling charities, being able to call organizations and tell them that, this is what a donor has set up for you. Oh, who was it? Oh, they didn't want anyone to know. They just want good work to happen. They've admired what you've been able to do, and they want to keep making sure that that's available in the community. Things like that have been amazing. And the other, to see even donors who have left part of their overall plan at PCF to be awarded in a discretionary fashion by the foundation, so that that gift over time can meet different needs as the community evolves and changes and needs evolve and change. It's been great to see gifts that we received 40 years ago that are still around, still making an impact in the community, but meeting needs in a different way than they were 40 years ago. The needs were quite different. So being able to see that and the power of giving over time, from people who have left gifts to us in their estate, have been really impactful.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful.
I think that's important too, about it changing over time. It's just kind of, people, you don't even think that far into the future of how, that need could change or that charity might morph into something a little different. But it's so great that you guys keep their legacy going in that manner.
Yes.
And that's what the majority of our funds for our operating grants came from, correct? I
Yes.
mean, people leaving money to Pinellas Community Foundation to be able to find the needs and help solve them in the community.
And I love when a client finds an organization or a charity that they trust enough to go, what's best, you're going to do the right thing with the funds, and they can that makes them relax a little bit more. And the idea of the giving is that they know it's in good hands. They know it's going to, be guided by the right people.
And they could even pick a field of interest. They don't necessarily have to pick, just general funding. I mean, they can pick hunger. And then that we could every year make a donation out in their name or anonymously to organizations feeding people.
Yeah. That's really great. That's why I send them your way, because you guys have all the great creative solutions.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other final words of advice or encouragement you'd like to give anyone in the world of estate planning or charitable giving?
I always just tell people, to really research who they're giving to and, find out what they're passionate about. And if they have any sort of, overwhelming feelings or anything, to come see somebody like you or an attorney and help walk through what all the options are, because it is a fun, creative kind of problem to solve, how you get, that desire into your documents and then, see it kind of flourish through an organization like yourself. So I tell people, when you're putting together your estate plan, to remember the things that you want to impact in your community as much as your family. So, and people really respond to that.
Well, we love helping people find that too. It's fun.
It is.
It's fun. Well, thank you, Kit.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. It's fun being here.
Yay.